Okay, good evening, everybody. And just to present out again, I've got another almost second or third one I think I've looked at, the BEOcenter by Bang& Olufsen. And this one that I have on the table here presented rather quite a challenge. And I've been working in collaboration with somebody online remotely, and they had the system, and they live quite a way. So we were getting together online a couple of months ago to try and repair this. It had a mute problem when on startup, and the system would play, and then the volume would just cut off, and you couldn't get it back. And powering off and powering back on again either reset something, and or it didn't come back. So we had the circuit diagrams, or the user manual, which is readily available online for this system. And the gentleman in question, he had a little knowledge. He wanted to tackle it, so we used the weekly sort of meetings for him to try various things, from my interpretation of the diagrams to try and verify voltages, capacitors, and resistors, so to speak, and work our way through the system week on, and try different things. And I have to say that the chap was, for somebody with no experience, he performed quite well. He even managed to desolder an IC of 28 pins that and put in a new one. As we culminated in a 2 to 4 decoder chip, which I thought could have been potentially the muting problem. That was replaced successfully, and he still had the same volt. So it culminated in him sending me the units, and it's not cheap to ship this type of unit. As you can see, on the screen, I don't know what that's saying. Go away. So there is the. I've lost my camera now, so I'm not sure what's going on. Put my camera back on. There it is. Put it back up there. Now it told me to upgrade my software, and now it keeps telling me to upgrade to Pro. Anyway, so why I picked to do these things before I want to do something is beyond me. But anyway, I digress. So what I'm going to do is actually run through what the problem was, and reading this manual. There's a couple of footnotes at the bottom which actually states certain things. And here, as you can see, it's the BEOcenter's got a record deck, it's got a tape deck, and a tuner. And what was happening is that what you'll see on some of these sets, if anybody knows the BEOcenters, the 2200s, you will get the three LEDs come up. I think it's the phono, the FM, and three come up, and then it'll just default to P1 on the FM. And when that came up, you couldn't switch between anything else, and there was no sound, or the sound would go off no matter what the volume here was set to. That's the tuning on-off buttons there, and that's the long wave and medium wave. And like I said, the issue with this. So once I got it, I decided to try and scope around the area where I was not getting the signal, and the mute function comes from the phono deck, it comes from the tape deck, and it also comes from the tuner circuit. So when you're switching between each of the units, it mutes the audio, so you don't get any spikes through the circuits, but it's changing from one subsystem to another, where you're going from phono to tape, tape to phono, or from the tuner to the other bit, so you don't get any spikes coming through the center. That's what I assume. And then on power up, there's a time constant which allows the delay before the audio comes through, so you don't get any blast. I'd always switch these systems on with the volume down anyway, so any amplifier, that's my recommendation, is keep the volume down low so you get no inrush of current, and it would protect the devices long term. So with that, with the manual, this is what you're looking at here is the the device, the LC7815. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I want to go through the circuit initially for, this is the, yeah, the diagram D. I don't really want that one, to be honest with you. It did give a recommendation in the handbook what to do, but this is the diagram B, which is the control circuit, and these are the two power amplifiers here for the left channel and the right channel. And what you'll see down here is an on-off mute, and then an AF mute, and an AF mute stands for audio frequencies. I would say on-off speaks for itself, and it gives you the locations. There's 1, 2, 3 for the AF mute, so I guess this one is active. And I do originally believe that this transistor had actually gone for whatever reason, and we'd replaced it with an equivalent. I have a book back there which gives you all sort of equivalents for all transistors, and I actually had some. I think it was a BC327 I had or something. It was there in the ballpark figure, so that's in, and it worked. And although the fault still prevailed, so we thought we found it, but then still thinking with this mute. So these actually tell you where these connections are going. It's going to A22E53. So if I go to the, let's go to the manual. Excuse me for scrolling. That's right at the bottom here. I'm going to come up to the diagrams. It's a very comprehensive manual. It tells you how to set up the amplifier, gives you a complete listing of parts, which is nice, and the mechanical subassemblies. And yeah, it is a rather nice manual. But I want to get to the. I thought I had it there. Awfully sorry if this is a bit horrid on the video. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here. I wanted to get that. This is where I wanted to get to. So this was the device that culminated in me thinking that the where the problem stemmed from, because as you can see here, you've got the inputs which are on the front panel, so you can select between AM, phono, or tape, and they actually go into this control, and it will determine which button's been pressed, and by default it goes to the FM setting, and there's a control function here which enables one of these outputs at a time, and when you switch on it defaults to the first one. So it's decoding whatever input's coming in here, and then obviously the mute button, the mute functions, and the mute timer here. And these timing functions are set by this RC network, R317 is C43, R313, R42, and this is just an output buffer there on pin 21. And these voltages were correct for the two rails, the plus and minus rail, but I felt that something was being latched inside the circuit. So I said, well, we changed this one, and we had exactly the same fault. And once it defaulted on switch on, I think the phono light was on. I'm not sure if the tape light was on. The phono AM and FM was on. There's three. But you may see those flash up if you have a unit, and then it will just go straight to P1. So I'm just going to turn it off here. Yeah, it comes up with P1. Or you might, that's the FM. So I'll just turn the volume down again. So I'll show you the unit in a minute. I haven't got it completely back together again yet, but I just wanted to run through this. Now I will take you to what they say in the service manual rather than scrolling through it. I've got a copy here. So one thing I did see also, I had a cartridge, just a basic tape, and it was slowing down and stopping, and I thought, maybe it's because the gentleman in question who owned this unit, he did change the belts, and I did check out the tape system, and the belts were on correctly. I put it all back together again, and I was happy, and I still had a tape that was sort of sluggish, but another tape worked fine. And they do say here that the tape head bridge seizes, and it says in the early sets a fault may arise that the tape head bridge seizes, too little clearance. The problem may be solved by replacing the guide position number 22008. The new guide is delivered together with a ball, like position number 22024. Modification has been introduced in production. So that's a known fault with this system. So whether or not it's going to use this, I found this a couple of tapes that work well. So it's not a really big issue. So if you have like a C120 or something where the wheel, it's a 2-hour tape, so there's a lot more tape inside, that might put a bit of more weighting on it, and it might actually not scroll or turn so well. But this is another interesting part here. It says the set does not start on P1, so it should start on P1 of there's a 4 preset memory on here, which you can set the FM channels, as well as a manual dial. So the set periodically does not start on P1 when it is in a warm condition, switched off, and immediately after switched on. It says the problem can be solved by interrupting the 12-volt supply to pins 13 and 14 of 3IC3. So what's that saying? That's saying on circuit 3 IC3 and inserting a resistor of 22K as well as mandatory capacitor 22 microfarads at 16 volt from pins 13 and 14 to chassis. So supply to pins 13 and 14, and then the same similar RC, so 12. So we're only going to put a 12-volt supply pins to 13 and 14, which there is, and inserting a resistor 22K as well as a mounting capacitor. So you're taking that to the chassis or ground of the unit. The modification was introduced in production after approximately 12,500 sets. So it was a known problem. Now this one doesn't have it because I obviously checked the circuit diagrams, or actually checked the circuit. And it's a bit of a faff to get the whole thing out. And I do take my hat off to the chap Mike that did this without so much experience of getting things like this apart. And it's not for the faint-hearted, I must admit. And getting everything back together in situ and getting everything bolted back down again is, it's quite a feat. But this thing is, I've done a video before. It's been really well made, and the quality of this is excellent, I got to say. But anyway, so it's a known problem, but I could take a look at this or whatever, but I really don't think it's worth it at the moment. So if I get back to the diagram, so back to this. So these are obsolete, these devices now, but they are still available for on eBay and places like that. Now, what I wanted to have a look for those the diagram 3. Let's see where that is somewhere. This is it here. So if I just go up one, they are in parts. This diagram. Oh, it's not very good, is it? But let's come back down again. This is the IC3 here, which says it's the FM program selector. So they've already got pins 13 and 14 going up to rail with that 27K, not a 22, but nothing going to the chassis from here where they're saying add a resistor, and they don't say to add. I guess it's in series. You want to put them both in parallel, otherwise you just get a resistor going to ground, a voltage drop from here to ground. So you would probably get a lot of power across the resistor. Anyway, so what's it look like down here? There we go. So I haven't done that, and as you can see, you've got a mute function here, which is coming out, and it's going to here to 12 volts and wherever else it's going. And yeah, it really seems to be quite complex the way they've got the whole muting done. So what I will do is I will pull up the manufacturer's code. It says discontinued product across here. It's a 2-pole 4-position analog function switch, as is what we could see. And it just basically gives you the features of the device and your pinouts here as any IC would do. And they just give you so a bar, say TM out, doesn't actually give you the pin listing, but it's the function of the pin. So there's your inputs and here's your outputs. So it's A1, B1, and then you've got A and B and C in. So depending on what you've got here, this will actually switch the output. So there's your input control there, the mute control timer, and it gives you down here what you can actually do. So for the mute functions, we've got, let's have a look. So the mute in, the input for forcing audio muting control signal mute to be triggered externally. If the fixed level at L, mute output becomes H level. So the fixed level, if fixed at L level, mute output becomes H. So it's inverse, I suppose. And then the reset, the CR time constant pin to determine the time interval of audio muting control signal. So the time delay. So typical CR network. So once that capacitor is charged up to a high, the output becomes low, so it's inactive. And again, they give you some examples down here. Supply, dual supply operation, sample application circuits, tape monitor function. So if it doesn't receive an audio, it'll switch the tape off. Single supply operation for the LC75, 7815, and the triggering for the muting. At the time of initial application of power supply, you can set this for whatever you want. You could leave it for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, or whatever this CR is. And the muting period depends on the CR time constant. So that's where it's mute in, control, and then mute out. So and it gives you a little timing diagram of the periods that you could set. I mean, this would all be in relative terms, so whatever you set the CR to. So all those values here for the resistance and capacitance were fine. There was nothing wrong. So it almost looked as if it was the device again. So, and what I did notice with this circuit, if I go back to it, what I did notice, if I go back to it again, he says, where am I? Okay, that's not that one. Where was it? Is it this one? That's the IC3. Let's get back. There he is. Now, what I did notice here is they've got pin 7, which doesn't seem to be connected to anything. So I thought, well, all these are good. It could be the whole age of thing, but I know this device is brand spanking new, and it is a Sanyo Hitachi 7815. Coincidentally, not to be mixed up with the 7815 regulator. So what to do? And what I did is when I connected my DVM between the ground or the chassis point, and I wanted to monitor what pin 7 did, the thing sprang into life. And when I say spring into life, the radio came on. And I thought, oh, what have I done? So I switched the machine. I'll switch it back on again, back to the usual fault. And again, I went to measure pin 7, and whatever I was doing the DVM, it was loading the pin, and it was bringing the system up. So I thought, well, that was good. And I took it off again. And then what I did is I shorted pin 7 to pin 8. Now, pin 8, according to this, is it there? Pin 8. Let's go back to see what pin 8 is. Pin 8 is denoted as, so there's pin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's the reset pin. Is that reset or mute in? 7 is the reset and mute in. So the reset must be set high. It's already on high. So what I thought I'd do is what I was doing is I was shorting pin 7 and pin 8. So I was causing the mute in to go high, and irrespective of what was happening on the input. And it says there's no listing for pin 8 down here, or pin 7. Well, there is for pin 7, but not for pin 8, and the pin 8's there. So input for forcing audio muting control signal mute to be triggered externally, which it and then it says if it's fixed at level L, mute output becomes high. So if I fix it, that means it's always going to be at the certain level, which is what I thought, well, I will do. So we'll go back to the diagram I was talking about, and pin 8 on here, 24, I can't see pin 8 on here either, so pin 8 isn't being used either. So I thought, well, so when I the pin 7 reset actually resets this internal signal as if you're resetting the whole machine upon switch on. So by shorting pin 7 and pin 8, 8's not listed on now. Just check again. Oh, 8 is mute. There we are. So by forcing, sorry, I missed it there. There it is. I knew it was on here somewhere. So that's 12 volts. So bypassing this RC network here and not waiting for this because this capacitor, it's only a small capacitor, 4.7 microseven, 4.7 microfarads for 11.2 volts. So I forced this 7 to 8. So I shorted these two pins out on the actual circuit board and I switched it on and off and it went to P1 all the time. And then I could switch between the phono, AM, FM, the tape and the phono. And the phono worked. I just had to level the table. And yeah, it all works lovely. And that's why I did. So why, and then switching between all of them with my headphones on, there was no crackle or no sharp, snap of any audio happening. So, and that's where we are. So that's where I am with it. I don't see why I need to do anything else with this because I've sort of done an engineering workaround rather than add components. I've sort of simplified the circuit by changing the pin out configuration for or the pin configuration for the LC7815. Uh, it's I do think it's a bit of a bodge, but if it works, it works. And in the big scheme of things, it's an old set. It's there's no guarantee of what they're saying that to do there is going to work. So it just goes to show, even with Bang& & Olufsen back in the day, they had issues with the tape deck and they had issues with the intermittency of the powering up sequence for the device. And I think when they do say when you get that, you just switch it on and off again. But I soak tested this for a while. I've been listening to some good old 45s and 33s from my collection and some tapes. I listened to the radio, and I've left it on, overnight, and I pull up the volume again, and it's fine. It's not muted at all, so the fault has gone. I can say quite confidently. So with that, I'll just pause it here for a slight minute, and then I will just show you around. Okay, so here I am. I've got the there's the phono deck, the tape deck, and I've got the this is this part here is the main sort of amp or the preamp for the tape deck, and the signal on these obviously go off to the heads with the recording control and the playback, and these little parts here, if you can see that, if I can get it in a bit better. I think these come from the phono and the radio for taping, perhaps. You're not supposed to tape live music or tape anything. These are this little PCB here is the function for the headphones, aux in, and left and right speakers. You've got a selection of the two speakers at the back. So you've got four connections, so you can select between. So if you had this in the sitting room, you could put two speakers in the kitchen and run it in the kitchen if they were adjacent. That's the sort of thing they did on these stuff in the 80s. And at the back here, that's the power amp, and it is actually there's two large sort of devices here. It is powered on at the moment. It's got to be very careful. I had this thing out because the mute circuit does run to that, as I showed you in the diagram. And that's your on-off switch here, and what's down here as well is up on the board. I get that out of the way. It's not focusing in. So over here is the main power supply. That takes the 240 volts in and it creates all the voltages, and with the transformer steps it down. And there's a 40 volt power supply, 20 volt power supply, and there's two 12 volt power supplies here. And there's two 7812 regulators here. I'm sure they are run twos. If you can see that. They are 12 volts, and this thing does actually get quite warm. It's very nice and warm, this, so it is generating quite a bit of power for the 2 volts, the two 12-volt rails. And I think one of them is actually for the motor for the, as you can see there, it says on it 12 volts DC. Inside there's a little pot. You actually tweak the speed of the motor. I didn't need to do that. And up here you have the tuner circuit with all the the adjustments, and there's the switch to switch between AM and long wave, and the aerial. I do have the aerial plugged in at the back, so I can actually test that out while I'm here. Here's your presets for your P1 to P4 for your radio, FM radio. Here's the sliders for your balance control, your recording level, and your treble and bass. And the circuit below is actually the control circuit where all the buttons are and the function buttons. So you can select between phono, FM, and tape, and then your play, stop functions and rewind functions are on this board as well. And right in behind there, there's another grounding PCB which is about that size, which so the connections for the to desolder the 7815 IC is underneath there, and that is I said it's a real pain to get to, I suppose. And yeah, so it is quite well built. The wiring looks a bit of a mess at the moment. I've got to tidy all that up and get it back in again. And what I'll do is I will two-handedly will get this down. I'm just going to put you down for a minute, and you can see at the back there the two lamps are on. They run off the 12 volt power with the 12 volt PCB. There's 15 volts AC coming into here, which no, not AC, 15 volt DC coming into here, which the regulators are regulating down to 12 volts. But there's two taps which come off with the blue wires, which go over to there. You can see which generate the power for the little LEDs, which illuminate the panel once everything's in situ, and it does look very nice. So I'm just going to drop this down, lay it into situ, and you'll see how if I just line that up with the on-off switch, so I should know I won't short anything. It's going to rest slightly on those cables, and you can see how this all looks now if I come around here. So I'd like to just block out those two lights for a minute. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to put this here just to blank them off if I can slightly, just to give it, just so you can see what it looks like. I lost my audio there for a minute. I don't know if I'm working anymore. Let's just check that out. Let's check that out. Just going to see if my audio just kicked in, because I think, let's see that. Yeah, I'm still going on the audio. That's okay. So I'm still recording. Yes. All right. So if I switch it on and off now, see, we'll just let it go down for a little while. So when I switch on, it goes straight to P1. I can put it to FM, and you see the stereo lights flashing. I'll just tune it in a bit. You see this red marker coming in. So I've got something there now. Yep. Okay, so we have something there. I'll turn the volume up. I'll just turn the volume back down again. And I can, if I wanted to, switch to the AM now. And you'll see this light over here is now on, saying it's medium wave. And if I switch it between medium wave and go to long wave by selecting this button here, it puts that light on there, as you can see. And if I want to do tape, let's go to the tape. I just put the tape straight on, and then that's going to go to the tape, and then I'm going to push the play. It's a bit bright, sorry about that. Let's push the play button. And then what you get is obviously this level here. So I could say, well, that depends on the, so I can set the level here for recording. And you've got the Dolby, the tape, and the FM auto or mono. Well, I guess just leave it in auto, then it'll be, oh. It is quite loud on the old headphones, I've got to say. It's very good. It's very good. But that still carries on because it's receiving the signal, but it's not kicking it out to the amplifiers. So the last one then is the phono. When you put the phono on, it'll detect what you've got. Because I've got a large record on there, that's a 45, it's a 12-inch, it's David Bowie and China Girl, I think. So let's switch it to phono, and it will automatically detect and put it out. But then I put it to 45. So there you go. So that's all working. And if I push phono again, it'll actually take it all off and drop the arm. I say, put the arm back into its home position, which is hidden away under there. So I think I'll get it all back together again, and yeah, I'll polish it all up, make sure all the dust is out of it. I did find a tiny little brush inside this. I thought, oh look, there's a little brush there. Oh, it must be an original BEO brush. Let's have a look. I'll just get it. I think it's somewhere. Yeah. Bonus, look, I found this little brush inside. Once I took all this out, yeah, a little brush there. So, very handy. Yes. So I hope I'm sure the gentleman is very pleased about this, and you know, I'd use this if I had one of these myself. I know there's another one that somebody's got that doesn't have a stylus, but I would use this. It's so it's so flat, and it's just a talking point if you had people come around to visit. It's you know, yeah. But I've thoroughly enjoyed this. It's really challenged me, and I had to get my old scope out and actually start looking at signals and as well as voltage levels and measuring it. And we were at it for a good few weeks, and yeah, it was a great collaboration, and it's culminated in me having received this, and between work and going away and coming back, getting getting some time to do this in the evenings, and getting myself into trouble, and you know spending too much. The hours just wing away when you're got your head deep into this, but it's been thoroughly enjoyable, and yeah, that's and there we are. So with that, I shall leave it there for the good old Bang& Olufsen. Is I'm going to focus now. Bang & Olufsen. It's probably focus better out here. Yeah, Bang & Olufsen 2020 100 2200. Very nice it is too. Okay, I hope this helps. Thanks very much, and goodbye. I've got to find my off button now. We're going to pause it there.